I spent years believing that family meant unconditional loyalty, a sacred bond where you protect your own no matter the cost. But on a scorching July afternoon, surrounded by the laughter of my own relatives, that illusion was shattered in a single brutal second. I learned the hard way that sometimes the people you sacrifice everything for are just waiting for an excuse to watch you bleed. As I stood in the grass with my face stinging, I realized my silence had only fueled their cruelty. The day started normally enough, with me arriving 3 hours early to set up my sister's backyard celebration. I bought the decorations, prepped the food, and hauled heavy tables across the lawn because Amanda claimed her bank account was completely drained again. I never questioned helping her, just like I never questioned the way her husband Brandon treated me like an annoying servant. For years, I shrugged off his nasty remarks and subtle insults because keeping the peace was easier than starting a war. Looking back, Brandon's arrogance did not appear overnight, as it was carefully cultivated through years of our family enabling his terrible behavior. Whenever he made me the butt of his cruel jokes at Sunday dinners, Amanda would giggle and tell me he was just playing around. My aunts and uncles would look away, pretending they had not heard his cutting words, because nobody wanted to disrupt the fragile harmony of our family gatherings. By refusing to establish boundaries, we slowly turned a schoolyard bully into a monster. The breaking point arrived so fast that nobody had time to process the violence before the damage was already done. I was carrying a heavy platter of drinks near the patio when Brandon backed up blindly and collided directly into me. Before the plastic tray even rattled against the concrete, his hand swung backward and struck my cheek with terrifying force. The entire backyard instantly fell dead silent, the music echoing hollowly as lemonade pooled around my ruined shoes, while Brandon glared at me with pure rage. Instead of apologizing for his explosive outburst, Brandon stepped closer and warned me never to touch him again, with a voice full of venom. I pressed my trembling fingers against my burning face, whispering that I had not done anything wrong, but my defense fell on entirely deaf ears. He barked an order for me to clean up the liquid mess and get out of his sight immediately. I looked at my cousins, my aunts, and my sister, begging for someone to intervene, but everyone frozen in place. Then Amanda walked over, and for a fleeting second, I genuinely thought my sister was coming to comfort me or check my injury. Instead, she stood squarely beside her husband, looking down at me with cold, hardened eyes as if I were the dangerous aggressor. She commanded me to apologize to Brandon right then or leave the property immediately, completely ignoring the visible red mark blooming across my skin. My heart shattered into pieces as I looked at the sister I loved. My throat tightened with overwhelming emotion, but somehow my voice remained steady as I refused to apologize for being physically assaulted. Brandon let out a mocking laugh, clearly satisfied that my defiance gave him an excuse to banish me from the family circle. Amanda simply gestured toward the side gate, telling me to get out since I wanted to be so stubborn. As I walked past my silent relatives, Brandon muttered a final insult about me always playing the victim. I fumbled with my car keys through a blur of hot tears, my body shaking with a mixture of intense humiliation and deep sorrow. As I started the engine, my phone buzzed in my pocket with an urgent notification from an estate attorney named Julian Vance. I ignored the message entirely, focusing instead on the throbbing pain in my face and the crushing realization that my family had completely abandoned me. I drove away into the quiet afternoon, completely unaware everything was about to change. By the time I reached my apartment, the sharp anger had faded into a heavy, suffocating exhaustion that made my bones ache. I noticed an old photograph on my kitchen counter showing Amanda and me smiling with our beloved late grandfather in his thriving summer garden. She used to call me her protector back then, but those sweet memories now felt like an elaborate lie. I had spent a decade giving them my time, money, and love, only to be discarded like garbage. My phone vibrated again, and this time I finally forced myself to listen to the urgent voicemail left by the estate lawyer. Julian Vance stated that we needed to discuss the immediate occupancy agreement connected to my grandfather's property without any further delay. I rubbed my aching temples, dreading more family drama, but a sudden spark of self-respect flared up inside me. I dialed the number back, determined to stop running from the ugly truth of my reality. The attorney answered immediately, his tone shifting into something deeply serious when I explained what had occurred at the family gathering. He reminded me that when my grandfather legally transferred the house deed to my name, specific protective conditions were put into place. If Amanda and Brandon ever subjected me to harassment, intimidation, or physical abuse, their temporary permission to live there would instantly terminate. The grandfather I looked after had foreseen their cruelty and built a shield for me. Julian asked if I wanted to exercise my legal rights, and I looked at my bruised reflection in the mirror before giving him the confirmation. I told him to move forward with the eviction immediately, realizing that mercy would never teach these people how to respect me. The lawyer promised to handle the entire process within the hour, leaving me standing in the quiet room feeling an unfamiliar sense of strength. For the first time in my life, I was standing up. Meanwhile, back at the suburban house, the party had slowly resumed as if my forced departure was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Brandon stood by the grill, boasting about how he had put me in my place, while Amanda nodded along agreement. However, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically, and the silence of the guests was no longer submissive but deeply uncomfortable. My Aunt Sarah finally spoke up, courageously telling Brandon that everyone saw him strike me without any provocation. Brandon tried to laugh it off, claiming she did not see the incident correctly, but Amanda quickly jumped in to defend his actions. She insisted her husband owed nobody an explanation and blamed me entirely for causing a scene over a simple misunderstanding. But the truth could not be buried so easily this time, and several relatives quietly began texting me to apologize for their cowardice. The collective guilt was stifling, and the guests began packing their things much earlier than usual. An hour after the final guest departed, Amanda and Brandon loaded their vehicle and drove back to the house they assumed they owned. As they turned onto the street, they noticed an unfamiliar white sedan and another vehicle blocking their driveway. 3 people were waiting on the front walkway, including a sharp man in a tailored suit holding a leather briefcase and a locksmith holding a heavy toolbox. Brandon climbed out of the car, demanding to know what was happening. Julian Vance stepped forward, introducing himself as the legal representative for the actual owner of the property. Brandon scoffed, claiming his wife had inherited the residence from her grandfather, but the attorney calmly handed him a sealed envelope. As Brandon tore open the document, the confident smirk vanished from his lips, and the color rapidly drained from his face. Amanda snatched the paperwork, reading the words stating that I was the sole legal owner of the estate. The attorney produced the certified copies of the recorded deed, along with the strict occupancy agreement they had both signed months ago. Amanda stared at her grandfather's signature, suddenly remembering all the private meetings he had with me before his passing. She had assumed we were discussing his medical care, never realizing our grandfather was ensuring I would be protected from their greed. Brandon began screaming that they could not be thrown out, but Julian remained completely unmoved by the tantrum. Julian pointed directly to the 7th clause of the contract, which explicitly stated occupancy would end immediately in the case of physical violence against me. Brandon demanded proof, but the lawyer revealed a folder containing written statements from Aunt Sarah and multiple cousins who had witnessed the assault. Brandon frantically called his relatives for support, but every single person either refused to answer or told him they would no longer cover for his abusive behavior. Amanda collapsed onto the porch steps, weeping as the crushing weight of her betrayal finally caught up with her. She watched the locksmith insert a new key cylinder into the front door, the metallic click signaling the absolute end of her comfortable lifestyle. Brandon stood completely paralyzed on the concrete, his absolute power stripped away by the very silence he had forced upon me. They were given a week to remove their belongings under strict legal supervision. A month later, I unlocked the front door of my grandfather's house, feeling a profound sense of peace wash over me. I spent the rest of the summer repairing the old porch railing and planting vibrant new flowers in the garden he loved so much. I still love my family, but I no longer allow their comfort to come at the expense of my own dignity. Walking away from that backyard did not break me, it finally set me free.